to get started. Again, this wasn't originally my session either. This session was someone else's who unfortunately dropped out, and I picked this session up as well. And my premise behind my deliveries is I've got to make this the best delivery in the conference. So I basically put a lot of effort into sort of designing this whole method of delivering managed metadata to you. So there's a whole theme and premise behind this managed metadata session. I've covered absolutely everything I could hope to think of for managed metadata, but there'll be time for questions at the end. There'll also be a little bit of a competition, so I'll be throwing a few questions out at the end, and obviously there's a prize for the person who answers the question correctly. But who am I? My name is Chris Casingena. I'm a SharePoint trainer from Combined Knowledge. I've been with Combined Knowledge for about 2 years now, coming up to in July. With Combined Knowledge, I train on SharePoint 2007-2010, coming up to 2013. I also train Nintex products, so Nintex Workflow, Forms, and Live. And prior to working with Combined Knowledge, I worked as an IT support technician, so supporting servers and SharePoint environments. So I've got a lot of experience with the system. Just a little bit of personal information. I've got a very cute-looking chinchilla, but don't let his looks deceive you. He's an absolute tyrant, and he's absolutely destroyed our house by pulling up carpet, ripping wallpaper off. I just thought I'd throw it on there because it's nice to put a little sort of social thing on there. You might also think that my profile photo is a bit bizarre. So what I've done is I've just sort of used Microsoft Paint to do that. I just put my face on the sort of Ghostbusters body. But that's the theme behind this session. I thought that basically everyone's seen a film. I hope has everyone seen a film? Anyone who hasn't seen a film? Well, good. I chose the right subject. Films are actually perfect for metadata. Now, it might seem like an odd premise. I could use a specific business scenario, but this is something that applies to everyone. We will be using business scenarios, but everyone's seen a film. And if you think about it, films are perfect for metadata. They have ratings, they have copyrights, they have genres. And we could use that to form a managed metadata service. So what will we be discussing? I'm going to give you an introduction to managed metadata, and this is going to be more theory to get used to what managed metadata is, what life was like before we had managed metadata. So back in SharePoint 2007, what were the sort of terminologies that we could use to basically define the metadata against our items and documents? We'll also talk about terminology of terms. So we're talking about a managed metadata service, but there's a few bits of terminology that we need to be aware of. Once we're fluent with what managed metadata is, we'll talk about planning. Now, this isn't an admin session. We're not going to talk about migration. We're not going to talk about GUIDs and using PowerShell and using third-party tools to migrate content. That's not your responsibility as an information worker. So we're going to be much more practical. We're going to see how we can save time creating term sets and how we can make those efforts a very quick way to implement content. So planning is a fairly short section, but we're going to be showing you a couple of demos there. Implementing managed metadata. So that hooks into my planning demonstration. I'll also show you how to set up and work with term sets. There are a lot of little finite controls that you kind of look at and glance at and think, deprecate term. Deprecate term? What on earth does that mean? So I'm going to go through all of those little options. It may sound a little bit tedious, but quite a lot of those options are quite important when managing term sets. Talk about the benefits. I love talking about the benefits. It's the payoff for all of your hard work. So once you've set up managed metadata, how can you get it used in the company? How can you make the best use of that system? I'll show you a few steps. And then we'll talk about SharePoint 2013. This is a SharePoint Evolution conference. I'm going to be starting off by talking about 2007, moving on to 2010, and finishing the course with 2013. So what was life like before managed metadata? In 2007, if you've used a 2007 environment, who's used 2007? Excellent. Now, managed metadata as a service did not exist in 2007. So what did we have to assign metadata to our items and our documents? Well, a favorite of mine was the choice column. At least you can define the values that users can pick from, but they were a bit rigid. At the very best, you could create a choice column with quite a lot of responses in, but then you get this massive choice list, and it's very sort of difficult. So you have to keep it fairly refined. You could declare a choice column at the site columns level, which means that you couldn't ever really span this information beyond the site collections. That was a bit of a restriction. List lookups, this was another way that you could sort of pull information from an existing SharePoint list and populate it as a choice in a column. Those were always good. This is always one that breaks down, terminology governance. You could say to someone, here's a document, this is the term that you're meant to put in that column. They'll go, how many pages is this? No, I'm ignoring that, it's 67 pages. So, terminology governance, you can say, this is the way you should put something in. Governance is very good, but it's very difficult to enforce. Third-party tools. If you wanted something fancy like managed metadata, you could use a third-party tool back then. But in SharePoint 2010, we decided to put in a managed metadata service. So, we're going to have an introduction to managed metadata. Ignore my cheesy quotes. I was actually going to have a competition to see who in the audience could create the most cheesy quote, but I thought that was a bit unfair on you, so I've changed the competition for later. But what I did, this is movie themed, and what I'm going to do is just throw in a couple of random slides from a few of my favourite films. So what we're going to talk about here is an introduction to managed metadata, to introduce you what has been introduced to SharePoint 2010. So first of all, what is managed metadata? So I've probably said that term, and I haven't been counting, but probably more than 20 times in the last 3 minutes. So it's new to SharePoint 2010. It's not restricted by the site collection. So in 2007, wherever you declared a site column, it couldn't go beyond the site collection. However, it's not restricted by site collections, so you could use that terminology that you create in multiple site collections. Big advantage. We've got a hierarchical structure. So rather than having a flat level structure where people can select keywords, they can delve down and go into drill downs to say department, and then they select IT, and then they select service delivery. So they can go into terms, and by having that hierarchy, it's not displaying too much content at once. So for end users, they just want to see the bare essentials and then drill down into what's interesting rather than see everything at once. I'm trashing the place, do apologise. Delegation of ownership. There should never be one person in charge of a term store. So what we can do is pick sections of the terminology to basically delegate out to other people. So ownership is incredibly important. So what we're going to do today in this session is talk about how we can delegate ownership out. Managed metadata also gives us consistent terminology. If you're using a term set in multiple site collections, if you're searching for something and other site collections are using the same terminology as you, it means that if you conduct a search, you can be fairly confident that if that keyword's being used in another site collection, it will return in your search. So again, better searches. And one thing that I normally train, I train quite a lot of people on using the content organizer. The content organizer is a standard SharePoint feature which basically allows you to route documents in SharePoint. So if a document comes into a drop-off library, it's then routed by a rule to go to another library. That's fantastic, but the rule acts on metadata. If that metadata is wrong, then it will just sit in the drop-off library and say there's no rule that matches me because someone's entered the wrong metadata. Workflows, who designs workflows here? Okay, some of your workflows have trigger points and they trigger off various metadata. So what you might do is you might have a form in a list and you might pick out a various piece of metadata. If someone fills that in wrong, maybe your workflow doesn't match up with that term and it fails. End users hate that. They say, oh, it's failed, the system's broken, and then they spread a bit of a bad vibe about SharePoint because they've seen an error. It's not that. They've made the problem because they put in the terminology wrong. But then again, we never really enforced that. So we need to have a method, which managed metadata provides, of giving them that consistent technology. And also, suggested data entry. If you don't know what to put into a field, you probably leave it blank, don't you? You get forms from the government and it says, I need to know your net value salary for the last 20, and you're thinking, well, I don't know that. I wonder if I can just leave it blank. And people, if they don't know the value, will leave it blank unless it's mandatory. So suggested data entry allows them to start typing and it will show them values that start with the keys that they've typed. As you can see, for the genre, I started typing in A and I got action, adventure, and animation. So where is managed metadata stored? A few people will want to take pictures of these slides. Fantastic. I'll leave this slide up for a few moments so that you can take snaps. But just remember, the DVD you get at the end of the conference has all of these slides available on it. So if you want the slide deck now, you can take a snap. If you wait, I think, a few months, you'll receive a DVD with me talking for ages, but you also get the slide deck as well, okay? So where is managed metadata stored? Now, this is a huge value behind this system. It's not the metadata that you add to the column. That's not the managed metadata. That's just a reference to nothing in the library, nothing in the site, nothing in the site collection, nothing in the web application, which we don't really look at as information workers. Actually, all you're doing is when you pick managed metadata is you're going, right, I'm making a reference to this metadata service over here. And any web application can hook into this, meaning that your terminology can all be derived from one single source. Now, this slide has terminology that we're unfamiliar with. Some of you might know what the managed metadata service is, what the term store is, what the term set is, but we need to have a better idea of what those terms mean. So let me move on. Is everyone happy that they've got a photo of this slide? Do you want me to pose in front of it? No? Okay. Gotcha. Excellent. So, there is a definitive breakdown of what the managed metadata service is. And it starts with the biggest thing, of course, the term store. The term store, you must understand, is the largest object in the managed metadata service, and it is your database of keywords and terms. So this is basically the overall container for everything beneath this. So what we do is we have groups. Groups are basically additional containers where you can define ownership. So you might have a lot of terms that define your company's organizational structure, such as departments, such as job roles. That's all part of the company organization. So what you might do is have that as a few term sets, but order it as a group, and then define specific owners for that content. So just consider groups as placeholders for term sets. Term sets themselves are used to group related terms. So like I say, you have a term set for department. Your departments will be sales, marketing, merchandising, store operations, depending on whether you're retail based or whether your businesses lie in different areas. So this will change, but a term set is a group of related terms. Now there's two ways that you can define a term set, with a taxonomy or a folksonomy. A folksonomy is basically when someone makes up their own terms, so the end users make up their terms. Not exactly the most ideal situation, but there are some benefits. A taxonomy is the reverse. A taxonomy is basically when you say, you must use this term, okay? So, a managed term is a term that someone can only pick but not define. A standard term is basically a term that someone can specify. Now, we're going to talk about that a little bit more detail on the next slide when we talk about enterprise keywords and term sets. So we've got our group structure, we've got our individual term sets, and within the term set, it can be open or closed to define whether we declare terms or managed terms. And then there's also managed keywords. This is like the rogue of the managed metadata service. Enterprise keywords is a way of you saying, right, hello end users. You can make up as many crazy keywords as you like to index the content that you're tagging. So if you're tagging a document, create any keywords you like. I don't want you to touch this managed metadata service. This is perfect. I don't want you to touch that. You've got this managed keyword section where you can create as many keywords as you want. Doesn't matter, they're all stored in one location. There's a flat hierarchy, so it's not really sort of very well developed. But it means these keywords can be used to tag documents. The managed keyword section is basically a field. In fact, let me go on to the next slide. So the enterprise keywords here, it's a folksonomy because basically enterprise keywords allow your end users to define keywords. It is basically a list or library setting. So you don't actually really configure it up at the term store management level. You actually switch on an additional column for your library. What that allows people to do, I'll offer a list as well. What that allows people to do is basically create their own keywords. The keywords that they create can be used for social tagging in my site. I tagged a document with, this is the greatest document in the world. That phrase could be used as a keyword, and that, once created, can be used to tag other documents. The keyword, enterprise keywords can also include all managed metadata terms, so people can tag it with your defined terms as well. So this is more of a folksonomy. A term set is a taxonomy or a folksonomy, depending on whether you open or close the term set. And there's a few tips I'll tell you about that a little bit later. It has a hierarchical structure, unlike the enterprise keyword, which is completely flat. So when someone defines a keyword, it's just a list of keywords. So you can have a hierarchical structure with a term set. Ownership can be applied at multiple levels, and it's got enhanced options for managing your terms. So if anything, this is the more organized option. This is the more ad hoc selection if you want to use it. But you can use both, and I'll show you in my environment how I've done that. Both are managed from the same location: site actions, site settings, and term store management, which we'll be in later. Yes?
Is there any, we just built a metadata scheme and we're working on like a controlled vocabulary. So the taxonomy and the folksonomy, to get started quickly, is it quicker to adopt one rather than the other?
I like that question. Okay. So the question was, is it easier to adopt a folksonomy or a taxonomy to start off with? I say a folksonomy. It sounds like an odd answer, doesn't it? If you start off with a folksonomy, you could basically switch it to a taxonomy later if you use it as a term set. Imagine this scenario. You pay an information worker thousands of pounds to go around your business and talk to people and say, what kind of terms do you want in your library? What do you want in this list? That could, like, every time he answers a question, the guy's making like about £50, and he's probably dragging it out. So what you do is you go to your department, you say, sales, you know better than anyone what terms you'll be using. I'm going to open this term set, create a folksonomy. You create the terms that you want. At the end, we'll audit it, make sure there are no duplicates, spelling errors, incorrect use of capitalization and stuff, make it perfect. Close it, create a taxonomy. Sales love it. They've got keyword definitions that they created, so there's not any random areas in there that they haven't really understood. So they create the term set, and then it becomes a taxonomy because you close it and organize it. Also, you've probably seen the switch between open and closed. Yeah, so I'll show that to the rest of you as well. So fantastic question. So I just shouted your question out loud just so the camera gets it at the back. Thank you very much for that. That was a very, very good question. So, still on the movie theme here. Has anyone seen Wreck-It Ralph? Yeah, a few nods, good. So, when to use managed metadata. So you might be thinking, when is it useful to implement managed metadata? Let's listen to the end users for a second. I'm not going to do voices for the end users. They usually sort of sound a little high-pitched and whiny for my liking. Basically, I want a clear idea of what to enter in forms. This harps back to my statement earlier when I said, I don't know what to put in this form. So descriptions sometimes help, but managed metadata helps as well. They start typing, they see the terms that they can use, and that helps them understand. They can even use the tags next to the field that they're filling out to see that terminology and to drive into that and see what they need. My workflows won't start because someone has entered the wrong information. Again, this is a common problem. When I create workflows, everything has to be spot on. So I normally use choice columns. Managed metadata works as well. So by defining the information, we can get our content organized on workflows and other business critical processes to work off correct information. I would like to use terms to search for content. If people are using different terminology to define the same thing, then it can be difficult to search. If someone declares it as type A, type B, type C, for example, someone might call our IT department IT. Another person calls it information technology. Someone may call it ICT, and all of those terms, you might have to search 5 or 6 times before you find what you want. So by using one term, we can find the correct content. End users are wrecking the integrity of my metadata on items and files. Yeah, I agree. I'll show you an example of that, actually. Let's have a look. So let me just full screen this VM for you, and let me go here. So what I've got is my DVD rentals place, and let's go into my DVDs. So my business is basically lending out DVDs for money, like Blockbusters, except they've gone downhill. But my business will persevere, but I've got a problem. End users are ruining my metadata. Look at this. Animation with a lowercase, animation with an uppercase. If I try and filter by animation, I've got about 3 or 4 options for animation due to variations in the metadata. So when I say they're wrecking it, it's kind of, you know, got really sort of odd content in here, lowercase comedy. Someone's put, I am the law for Judge Dredd. Well, that's a little bit of an issue. And other people, wrecking metadata sometimes isn't just entering metadata, it's leaving it out so that I can't define filters on that content. So if I go back to that slide, that's what I mean. When people are getting lazy filling out content, now I could have made it a mandatory field, but then they might just not know the answer and then just put in something random. So that's just as bad. Also, site columns are great for me, but I want to basically use my content in another site collection. So again, site columns are restricted by the site collection. So if you want to expand out, you need the Managed Metadata service. So planning. Like I said, this isn't an admin track. We're not talking about migration here. There are third-party tools for migration. There are PowerShell scripts for migration. If you want further information on migration, come to me at the end. I've got a couple of slides that I've just hidden from this slide deck, and I can show you those a little bit later if you're interested in migration. But the whole point of this is to tell you as the information workers how to save yourself time and not have tedious data entry. Microsoft provides you with an Excel spreadsheet. Has anyone used the Excel spreadsheet to create a metadata term set? Excellent. There's a few people here. Has anyone never heard of this? Don't be embarrassed. It's absolutely fine. Brilliant. OK, so this might be new to some of you. Microsoft, when defining a term set, allow you to download a template. You can use this template to speed up the creation of your term sets. You can also use it to implement your term sets as well. There's no point in spending ages planning your metadata in an Excel file to just recreate it manually. So Microsoft allow you to import all of the content from that spreadsheet and pull it into your SharePoint environment. Yes?
Export it back out again if you built an amazing metadata schema for another app.
I wish. Unfortunately not. I've looked into solutions. If I was talking about migration, the first thing I probably would have said is that you can migrate by exporting out to an Excel spreadsheet. Because the content's stored in a database, unfortunately, that kind of information will not transist across unless you backed up the database and then did crazy stuff with GUIDs to try and get it back in. Yeah, it would be lovely. And I haven't heard of such blissful rumours in 2013 either. It would be great. Maybe Microsoft will listen. Maybe not. So let me show you a demonstration of how to use this wonderful feature. What I'm going to do is show you how to access the template, and then rather than building the template in front of you, which is arguably rather dull, I'll show you one that I've made earlier. Very Blue Peter-esque. So, actually, let's have a look. How am I doing? Not bad, not bad. I can't pat myself on the back too much just yet. So, let's go to my environment. Now, for some of you, you might want to just know how to access your managed metadata. For the site that you're in, and it can be any site, you can always access the managed metadata term store as long as you are an owner of your site. And what you do from any site is click on Site Actions at the top, and you click on Site Settings down here. And the term store management tool is available in that interface. So let me just quickly jump into that for you. So notice that we're in a sub-site, not at the actual site collection level, but we can still access this term store management. What I'll do, I'm just going to use a tool that I absolutely adore called Zoom It, and I'm just going to use that and run it to allow you to see the content in more detail. Ooh, magic. Term store management. This is the area that you can manage your term store from any site, okay? So I'm going to jump in there. And what we're going to see is this option, your metadata down on the left, but look over to the right, sample import. There is a sample file built onto this form that you can download. I've obviously already done it. The hyperlink's purple instead of blue. If I click on that, let's have a look at it. Now, Microsoft are being fairly good here, and they've actually populated it with sample information, such as a regional hierarchy. So what they've done is they basically said continental, political, country, province, county or state. They got region, district, borough, blah, blah, blah. So what they've done is they've derived their term set down to the 7th level or tier. So what you can do is basically highlight this, delete as much as possible, and start building up your own hierarchy. Now, the way it works is that you have these categories here, and then the substructure comes from the ones beneath. Now, this may not make too much sense at the moment, but let me show you the one that I put together. So let me just jump to my pre-completed, bless you. And I believe I just chucked it on my desktop, and it was called Movie Terms. Now, mine's not exactly as exciting, but this is all I needed. Note here, what you're doing is you're basically creating the tier 1 dropdown, and my tier 1 dropdown is rating. Underneath rating, we have universal PG 12A, 15, and 18. So if I expanded out 18, that would be the second tier dropdown. If I wanted, I could create further tiers, but I only really need 2 tiers at this point. For genre, I've put some basically another tier 1 category, and if you click genre, you'd see this level down. And further down, I've also created one for studios as well. So that's a quick taster of how you can populate this information. So if you're not sure how to get started with your term set, just have a look at the way that Microsoft have populated this form. Have a go, because you can always delete the term set after you've imported it and try again. It's not the end of the world. I'm not going to do a voice. But I am going to make you a term set you can't refuse. So what I'm going to do is technically I could implement either a brand new term set by creating it at the term store level, or I could import that Excel spreadsheet that I've just been designing. And what we could do is then start to basically use that in our document libraries and lists. And when I say I can make you a term set you can't refuse, what I'm talking about is making it a mandatory field, and then they have to select the actual term set itself. So that's what I mean by making you a term set you can't refuse. I'll just let this chap take a photo. You may like that slide. OK, so creating a term set. So there's a few important things here. First of all, I'll be creating a term set from scratch. So some of you might be thinking, well, he's just going to import a term set. He's not actually going to show us the full picture. So I'll be doing both. I'll import a term set, and I'll also create one from scratch. What we'll also be doing is taking a look at how to add synonyms. So, for example, ratings in America are known as certificates over here. So what certification is the film? It's a 15. You can't come in, go away. So I'm going to add a synonym to my rating section and give an additional label of certificate. And we'll also show you that import of the term set from Excel. So back in my environment, what I'll do, I had a term set earlier called promotions. I'm just going to delete that for now. And what I might also do is just go back to this metadata area. So what I've got is a bit of a mess at the moment. So rather than having ratings, copyright, and genre as either single lines of text, I want to turn them into managed metadata. So all the work that I put into that Excel spreadsheet earlier can simply be imported. To import that, see if I can give this a quick refresh. Oh, it's being a bit mischievous at the moment, so I'll ignore that for now. So, first of all, if I've got an option to import a new group, I can create a new group to house my term set. Groups are basically organizational objects for structuring your term sets themselves. And what you can do is I could create one called something like sample import. And then when you click on this drop down again, notice you've got the option to import a new term set here or start a new one. So if I import, I can point it at that Excel file that I've just been working with. Now, that's formatted as a CSV file, so please don't save it as a strange format after you've finished working with it. Always just save it as the format that it's currently in. So if I select import term set, this might be a bit rickety considering that I'm importing a term set that's already in the system, but I have full trust in my virtual machine. It will behave. So I'm going to import that movie terms. There we go. Didn't take too long, but then again, there's not a lot of content in here. If you're finding it is taking time, please just let it do its thing. Obviously, you could have quite a lot of terms in your term set. So here we go. So what we'll do let's have a little look down. So it's imported it nicely. So under copyright, we've got all of our film producers, and I've got my genres, and I've got my ratings. So that's imported rather nicely. So let's have another consideration. So importing term sets is fairly simple. I created a group, and then I imported under movie terms, imported under my sample import my Excel file. I'm just going to delete that. There we go. So the next thing I might do is create something from scratch. Now, bless you, I always started promotions. So what happens is, in my business, we have promotions. So if it's the spring, we have a spring sale. If it's summer sale, maybe. What I can do is start creating new terms. Now, the reason I create it in Excel is I think it's faster. Because what you can do, actually at the term set level, you can start creating new content. So under promotions, I click on this drop down, and I want a new term set for maybe winter promotions. And if I click off that, I click on this drop down and can start creating new terms. Now the system does help me here. If I type a term and hit enter, it drops down and starts creating a new term. So that can be helpful. So I've got my Christmas saver. And I've got another promotion called 2 for 1, something like that. So if I hit enter, it goes down. And you can start building up your term set in that way. If you want to go a tier further, maybe in 2 for 1 we've got another additional 2 options. We can create a new term beneath this term and say something like option 1 and option 2. So I don't think it's particularly difficult to create a list of terminology up at the term store level. However, I think Excel's probably giving you the option to plan it, and when you're happy with it, implement it. Because if you basically go type, and someone says, that's all wrong, do it again, it's not as easy to fix. Whereas with an Excel spreadsheet, you can make those tweaks and then basically delete it and re-import it again. So it's probably better to plan it in Excel. Now, when working with some of these terms, I mentioned that under entertainment, we have this rating here. So under ratings, you'll notice that you've got other labels where you can define a synonym. So ratings are also known to me as certificates. And I can add further labels beneath that. So if you want to define synonyms, select the term that you want to define a synonym for, and then just type in the synonym that you want to apply to it. Very, very simple. People always shy away from managed metadata. They think it's probably mind-boggling or really complicated. Actually, it's very simple. You just select what you want and then update the term itself. So, yes?
Can you include synonyms now in the import file in 2013? Because you couldn't do this in 2010.
Not as far as I'm aware, no.
So if you want to add synonyms, you've got to go in term by term.
Yes, as far as I'm aware, that is the case. I haven't been told otherwise, and I haven't read any materials that suggest otherwise either. So I might have a quick sort of scout around some of the other speakers and see if they know any other variations in that. But as far as I know, no, unfortunately not.
Chris, could you also set up, if you had something like an author field, where there was free text for someone to type an author, could you put a regular expression on there that had to be first name dot initial dot surname easily, in terms of, because then you'd have the data in there in the same sort of format?
The managed metadata column, so we're talking about at the end user level?
At the end user level, yeah.
Yeah. The managed metadata column doesn't really allow you to sort of validate. I mean, you could create, I'm not sure if you could create another column that validated the managed metadata column. I don't think it would be a very easy solution, to be honest. Yeah, you might want to create a column that validates that and that it's in the correct format, and you'd need to know the formula to define that validation. So possibly with a validation column that references your managed metadata column, but I'd have to test that. But it is a good question. Spider-Man quote. So with great metadata comes great responsibility, and there's no one true owner for a term store, so you should delegate it out. Let me tell you how you can delegate it out as well. Now, we've had a brief look at the structure, haven't we? So up at the term store level, this is our term store. We have groups, we have term sets, and we have terms, okay? How can they be managed? So basically, we're looking at this, but there is a farm level control. The Managed Metadata service can have administrators. If anyone is a farm administrator and they have access to the Managed Metadata service, they have the ability to govern all of it and add additional administrators if they want to. But we're not up here, we're down here, so let's focus here. So for a group, which is a container for term sets, you can define a group manager. Group managers can modify the terms in the term sets, but also they can add contributors. So they're like an owner for that section. Also, you can add people as contributors who can modify the terms in the hierarchy. So the reason we use groups is to allow people to govern multiple term sets rather than having to add the same people to the same term sets. A group is a container for ownership. If we go into the term sets that are nested under the groups, we've got a few other options. We've got owners. These are the term set moderators. They're kind of like contributors, really. So we've got owners of the term sets. We've got a contact field. It's basically an email address where you can actually basically contact people who is the recipient email address for term suggestions. So if an end user is using your terminology and they're thinking, well, we've got this product, it's a shoe, and the shoe's available in blue, black, but there's no brown option. I know we've got a brown option. I can't update the metadata, but I can click on email a request and send a request to this email address to let the owner know that they need a new term adding. And we've got stakeholders. There's nothing clever about the stakeholders section. It's just a collection of people who are interested in changes that happen to the actual term set itself. There's no automated process behind it, nothing intelligent. It's just that the owner can reference this just in case the owner wants to blitz something. So let's have a look at the options for ownership just quickly. So let's have a look. So at the group level, here's the option to declare your group managers. So you can declare Active Directory groups if you want to. You can also specify individual users. So at the moment, I don't have any group managers defined, but I know that Steve is highly invested in this. He said he'll manage all of my term sets. So Steve's a very nice chap. As well as giving keynotes all the time, he'll also manage my term sets. Also, I know that Zoe and Todd are contributors for all of the terms in this term set. So let's just put Zoe and Todd, and I'll just resolve that by pressing Control-K. Down at the actual term set level, I'm just going to apply that. The options that I mentioned earlier, the owner is myself, the Trains by Dave administrator, nothing particularly nice, so I might change the owner for a different person. So maybe the departmental structure in our organizational structure is governed by HR. So different term sets may have different owners, and this is where you govern the ownership of individual term sets. You can specify who's contactable if the term set needs to be updated, and who are our stakeholders here, which, like I said, is not particularly clever. It's just a reference area for owners to go, right, basically Milan and Zoe need to be updated if someone changes this. So it's just basically a placeholder for that information. How are we doing? 20 minutes. I don't think we're doing too badly. Let's go back to our slides. So once you've got your terms up there, what can you do with those terms? Quite a lot, actually, and let me explain some of these. I always mispronounce this one. I've been told off many times, so I'll try and pronounce it correctly. So create term, we've already looked at that, creates a new term within a term set. Okay, that's fine. Copy term, it creates a copy of the term in the current term set, so it just creates a copy in the same location, but it says copy of, and then it has the name of the original term. Then you can rename it if you want to, or update it. Copy term with children allows you to take a little section of the hierarchy, so you take the top term and any terms that are being declared beneath that in another tier. The top term is going to be declared as copy of and then the original term name, but everything under that structure remains with the same name. Reuse term is quite useful. For example, IT is a department, but it might be a cost center, and you've got a term set for departments and a term set for cost centres. So what you do is you reuse the term in 2 locations. So you just basically reuse the term in 2 locations. And if IT changed their department name, so to IT services, you update one term and the other term updates automatically. 2013 is hooked into this option, so I'll mention that a little bit later. Merge term, if you take 2 terms and go bang and slap them together, these synonyms and translations for those items are combined into 1 term. Deprecate term, I pronounced it correctly, I say depreciate for some reason. Deprecate term basically is a way of stopping people from using a term but without deleting it. So for my promotions, maybe if it's summer, I deprecate the terms for winter, spring and autumn. So I can deprecate terms that I don't want people to use. I can then reactivate or enable them when they're ready to be used. Move term makes you move the term to a different location, and delete term deletes a term. That's the simple stuff. And just to cover off term sets themselves, there are a few options with term sets, such as create a term, which creates a term in the term set, copy term set, which creates a full copy of the term set, but the name of the term set will be copy of. Everything beneath it will be fine. Here's an example. Spring promotions has been copied, but the remainder beneath are the same. Reuse terms, so it allows you to reuse terms from the current term set and then pick the ones that you want to reuse in a different location. Move term set sends it to another group, and delete term set deletes the term set. 3 questions. Just in regards to time, could you please make a note of your questions? I'll certainly answer them again. I do apologise, just a bit conscientious of the time. So to add content, we need metadata columns. So managed metadata columns are added at the document library or list level, and they allow us to hook into specific metadata that we want to use down at that level. So when I've created genre, when I've created ratings, and I created copyright, I want to use those as separate managed metadata columns. So how would I do that? Let me just come out of this again and go back into my VM. So what I'll do is I'll go into my scruffy library to start off with, and I've got this ratings, copyright, and genre columns, and it's an absolute mess. So what I'm going to do is show you a very short demo. I might start off with tidying things up, because they're an absolute abomination. So what I'll do is I'll go to Settings and go to Picture Library Settings, and then what I might do is get rid of, for example, I'll just get rid of ratings to start with. Once your term sets is set up, if you go back to your library, which is DVD for me, I'm going to add a column. When you create a column, you always give it a name, so rating. And you notice the option for Manage Metadata down here. Okay? So if you select Manage Metadata, you get a big scary error message. What does that mean? Well, it's a Microsoft error message, so you have to know hieroglyphics to interpret it. But what it's generally saying is that the Managed Metadata field will not appear in the Document Information panel in Office 2007 as a functional piece of kit. Basically, if you're using the Document Information panel in Office and you're referencing columns from SharePoint, it will only work in 2010. Further down, you can choose under Manage Metadata the group, the term set, the terms, and I'm going to hook into that rating term there. And everything that appears beneath it will be selectable. So always take the root as the highest level object, and you'll include everything beneath it. I'll scroll down. I could enter a default value. I'm not. And what happens now, if Christmas Carol is a PG, we go to Edit Properties now. Let me show you this. So we've got this rating column. And for end users, let me make that a little bit bigger, you get this tagging system at the bottom. Just down there. You see the double tags? Okay. So you can either do one thing. You can start typing, so it's either 12, 15, or if I actually click on this tag here, you get to see the whole hierarchy. So when I say users sometimes don't know what to put into the field, they can use those tags and see what they can select, giving them a better understanding of the hierarchy. So it's a PG, is it? Double click, OK, save. Done. So you have to add the managed metadata columns, but once they're in, you can start using that managed metadata. If I just quickly go, so we've covered the demo, we've implemented a managed metadata column, and just to show you what that looks like when you've done a little bit of work, I've got my very posh looking section here. So I've got all of my films, but if I switch to a view that shows you all of the details for those films, you'll see that my managed metadata is very, very consistent. So I've got like the copyright information, all of this is being retrieved from managed metadata. Further over to the right, I've got my ratings and other information. So I've got my ratings there, I've got my genre, and all of these are being pulled in from managed metadata. And if you have a look at the actual object for A Christmas Carol once more in this library, you'll see that I'm using quite a lot of managed metadata. I'm also using the enterprise keywords column, which was activated in the site settings menu. The enterprise keywords column adds this additional field here that allows you to reference all of your term sets and create your own tagging terms. So if I know that A Christmas Carol had snow in it, and I wanted to find this, if I typed in snow into my search engine, I can add the term snow and save. Boom. So you can use enterprise keywords to basically tag on anything that you want to, really. Now, that might be a little bit of a liberty that you're granting to your end users there, but sometimes it can be quite useful. Now, this is very important. A lot of people are afraid to ask the simple questions of what happens if you edit a term, what happens if you delete a term? Well, let me answer those questions because they're just as important as anything else we've talked about. So consider this. If you edit a term, what happens? So Walt Disney Studios changed their name to Disney Studios, for example, or something like that. I change the term. What happens? Reused terms in different locations update, okay, within the term set. So reused terms will replicate. Terms in the list will update on a 1 hour interval. Now, this is sometimes confusing for end users. They basically update a term, but nothing happens. It runs on a timer job called the taxonomy update scheduler timer job. No need to really pay too much attention to that, but the default runtime for that is hourly. So if someone updates a term, it will take an hour for that to replicate, okay? So just be aware of that. Search updates as well. So depending on how often your search crawl operates, your search will eventually update with those terms and the updates after the next crawl. If you delete a term, it doesn't automatically get rid of it from the metadata. So you delete, for example, AAA made-up films from the term set because it's rubbish. Now, it will stay in the format metadata until you go to edit the properties of the item or document. And then what it will do is it will say, this is not a valid term because it's been deleted from the term store. You cannot save the form until that's been removed. So you can delete a term. It will stay in the metadata until it's tidied up and someone goes in and edits the properties. There's some features in SharePoint 2013 which resolve that. Also, if a term is deleted, if it has a reused term somewhere else, so you have an original term, you reuse it somewhere else, and you delete that original parent, because that was referencing something that was the original, you can't just delete it. So what it does is it moved to orphan terms, so there's still a link between them, but it's no longer usable. So an orphan term is used if you delete a parent of something that's reused elsewhere. Slightly confusing, I know. So what are the benefits? So what I'm talking about here is the mileage. You spent a lot of effort setting up a term store. You've put in the managed metadata columns. What are the benefits of this? Well, basically, you've got additional data for views. So I could create something like, I've got all of this information. I've got consistent metadata. I could use a view to organize that. So I could very quickly show you that with all of this information on genre, for example, this column here, I might create a quick view. So I'll go to, oops. In fact, I want to click on this drop down here and, oops, create a view. And my view is going to be very quick and simple. I'm going to create a standard view. It's going to be called group by genre. And if I scroll down now, I could go to group by. I'll specify genre. Yeah, I'm losing the ability to look. What I might do is just tell the item limit to not limit at 30. I want to limit it a little bit higher. And I might use, I'm quite stylish, I'm going to use a style. So I create a quick view, and what I've got is consistent terminology, meaning that my group by doesn't look like a mess. It's actually got consistent terminology that I can use in views. Again, powerful feature. Also, metadata navigation. I like this. I'm searching for comedies that are a 15. I can use metadata navigation to use that. It's a simple library setting, okay? So you go into your library settings, you tick a tick box, and then you say, I want you to group by genre column, rating column, copyright column. So what I'll do is, I'll just show you the next slide as well. You've also got consistent search keywords as well. So what I did is, in my search engine, I said that you can pick up on these columns and allow people to filter by them later. So if someone searches for a film, they can use the metadata to use as refinement. So if they're only interested in like Columbia picture films, they can use that in the search engine to refine it. So big bonuses there for search. Just show you those quickly. How are we doing for time? 8 minutes remaining. Okay, challenge. So obviously the search is fairly simple. If I search for comedy in the current site, might regret that. I might not have warmed up the search engine appropriately. But what I'll do is I'll show you whilst we're waiting. In fact, let me just switch view back to my original movie view. So over on the left here, I've got my managed metadata. I'm sorry it's cut off slightly, but we've got genre, rating, and copyright. So if I wanted to go for the action films, I love action films. So I'm looking for action films, but I'm in a mood for a bloody film. Let's have a look for 18 action films. So do we have anything? Well, we've got one. It's using my original view there. I think I specified it as the default. But we've got shoot 'em up. So I could use shoot 'em up as my rental for tonight. So by using this metadata navigation, I can hook into that metadata and have an easier way for my end users to search for content. I was thinking of searching for like, animation and Universal to find like Finding Nemo or something like that, but I was just in the mood for like something a little bit more gritty. And hopefully my search might have updated. So if I search for comedy, you'll notice that on the left-hand side now, I've got various refinements. So I want comedies that were created by Universal Pictures. I can use that as a refinement for my search. Again, very useful. It's just...
Is that searching, if you had a document, would it search the document for those key terms, and then as the results, and then would it search the metadata?
It searches everything. So if you create a search, it basically does a tally of all of the keywords that appear in a document, and it can use that as a method of finding the document. But the metadata is actually used as a refinement. So when you're actually creating a search call and you're doing an index, it actually basically will pull the document back based on the content. But you can't refine by the content inside the document. It's the metadata that you're really refining by. Does anyone work with multilingual? So do you have sites with multiple languages? Excellent. So if you have language packs installed in your environment, you can actually go into your terms, switch language, and declare what the foreign term is for the term that you're declaring. So for French and German, it doesn't really relevant for the movie certificate 12A, but if I had a term such as our department, which might be a different term in a different language, I could actually just basically switch to French, declare what store operations is in French. I could also declare what store operations is in German. And when someone switches the language for a site, you can reuse the same term set. So again, another big bonus there. I spent a nice long evening setting that up just to take that one screenshot. I know it seems a little bit limited, but like I said, I put a lot of effort into these things. So we've bang on for time at the moment. I think I've done a very good job there. But basically, let's talk about SharePoint 2013. This is an evolution conference. Let's talk about 2013. What can we do with managed metadata in SharePoint 2013? I sometimes give SharePoint a bit of a hard time, so I like that quote from Ghostbusters when Peter gives Egon a Twinkie for being good. I'm saying that sometimes SharePoint, I take back some of the things I say about you because there are problems with 2010, and I'll mention some of those in a moment. But first of all, SharePoint 2013 has pinned terms, so you stick a pin in it. What pinned terms means is that if you reuse a term, in different locations, sometimes you're using a term such as, we'll go back to our marketing situation or our merchandising situation. We've got loads of products. Those products are used in different term sets. Now, only the merchandising team should be able to update those products, but because we reuse those terms in different groups, anyone in those groups can update the terms, which replicates up and down. So by pinning a term, what we're doing is we're saying, right, you can only update the term from this location. Any reuse of those terms are read-only by pinning them. So basically, you're locking them down, and they can only be updated from the original location. So that's a pinned term. New to 2013, not in 2010. Datasheet view. I put Ferris Bueller on here because that's how I felt when they actually did this. Datasheet view now supports, finally, the use of managed metadata. Now, Datasheet view's changed its name. It got a bit shy, and it goes, let's re-release ourselves. Let's call ourselves Quick Edit. So basically, what that means for us is that if you've got a managed metadata column and you go into Quick Edit, you can actually do some amazing things. So what you can do is search for your metadata. You can use the tags to find your metadata. But what you can do is basically highlight a whole column, okay? And then you can say replace all of it with sales, or basically add sales as the metadata to an addition to anything that's already there. Or, this is my favorite one, remove that term from more selected fields. So basically, store operations, boom, we kick them out. They're no longer a part of our company anymore. So we want to blitz that term from any reference. So we go in here, type in store operations as a department, and remove those terms from the selected fields. Job done, really quick. You don't have to go into field delete, into field delete. That will save you a lot of time. So not only is Datasheet view now Quick Edit and it's back and it uses metadata, it's incredibly useful. Sorry, just a quick question at the back.
Very quickly, what I've seen is the difference between the Quick Edit view and a Datasheet view.
Right.
If you use this one, you can do all that, but if you make a new view based on Datasheet view, it's still the old one with all the problems associated.
Yeah, because Datasheet view is not the same as Quick Edit. They've tried to market and rebrand it, but actually Datasheet view uses functionality from the Office product on your computer. So you can only use Datasheet view if you have Office. So because you're creating a Datasheet view design, using Office to facilitate that, and Office doesn't really have the functionality, whereas the new Datasheet view, or mainly Quick Edit in 2013, doesn't hook into Office. So you can use it on its own, but you know, like you said, the rigidity of it, they are really two separate things now. So it was a very, very good point. Let me just quickly check the time, see how we're doing. 2 minutes. Are you okay holding your question? Yeah, just keep it in there, keep it on the top of your mind. Now, this one caused me a lot of trouble, okay? A lot of people out there claim to know what metadata navigation is and then put it out there in a blog and say, metadata navigation allows you to use a term set as a navigation. Well, thanks for that. How? So I spent, and I'm not joking, probably about 3 or 4 evenings saying, I don't want to be that person who just repeats that to you. I want to be the person who actually knows what on earth that means. So I basically, in my SharePoint environment, spent ages working it out, and I refused to sort of just call it quits. And I found it out yesterday, okay? I know I'm cutting it short, but basically what I found out is that when you switched on in 2013 metadata-based navigation as your site's navigation, what you're doing is you're referring to a term set. But that's not the full story. What you're doing for each term, and you can see these tabs across the top, general, custom sort, navigation, term-driven pages, what you're doing is you're saying these pages in SharePoint apply to these terms. So you basically say that just imagine for this department, we've got a departmental homepage. We take the URL for that page, apply it to the term. We use the term set for our navigation, and the navigation builds based on the term sets that have applied pages. And then you can link to those pages from the term set. Now you might think, well, what's the difference between that and just creating some navigational entries? Well, this is more for catalogs, really. What you'd do is you'd have a catalog in SharePoint 2013 full of your products. Like, you know, Jessup's would have like different cameras and different models, different add-ons and stuff. What you do is you basically create a term set, create a catalog, and pair the two together so that when someone browses to buy your products, you've got all of the content across the top based on your metadata, and then you can delve down into that information. If there are any questions about that, please hold. I'll just get to the end of the session to allow people to go. I'll certainly be available to take questions at the end. I do like that you have questions. It means that you're engaged. So, just to round up what I'm talking about, so we covered a lot of metadata today. You're probably sick of the term, but it is Very useful. Very useful because it's a powerful system to have in 2013 and 2010. It has hierarchical structure and multi-level ownership, so you can delegate responsibility out to other people. You've got consistent terminology across the entire business because it's not restricted to site collections. You've got enhanced searches by using that metadata so that if you're trying to find a document across the enterprise, as long as the terms are being used, you can find that content and refine by it as necessary. You can rely on your workflows and content organizers now because the accuracy of it is being driven by your term sets. And also, this suggested data entry for end users. You may glaze over that and think, well, that's probably very small in comparison to the others, but our end users are the end goal. So if we make things easier for them, they will like the system more, and I think that's very important. So as always, may the metadata be with you. And let's finish off with a quick competition. Just hold fire for a second. Right, the maximum amount of terms allowed in a SharePoint term store is 1 million, okay? So I want to know, what's the maximum amount of terms you're allowed in a term set? It's obviously less than 1 million. Any answers? The closest one to get closest to the answer will win a prize. Let's hear it.
3,000.
Who said 30,000? Sir, what is your name? Craig. Rather than giving you a t-shirt or a key fob, I actually went to Amazon and because this is film themed, I bought a James Bond box set. I'd like to give that to you at the end of the presentation. Thank you very much. Excellent. Well, I tried to get the best session in the conference by delivering as much as I could to you. Hopefully I didn't overburden you with too much information. Please, if you have questions, come to the front. I'll certainly answer as many as I can. And for the rest of you who want to take your leave, thank you very much for attending.